Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we are diving into a truly fascinating, completely raw primary source document called the Campus House Protocols and Staffing Disputes. It gives us this incredibly detailed window into a highly structured care environment, and honestly, the intense friction that happens when strict rules are broken. We're going to deconstruct the internal logic, the interpersonal conflicts, and the deep underlying need for predictability that drives this whole narrative.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. The staffing dispute, 2. The campus house protocols, 3. The copycat days, 4. Witnesses and stakeholders, and 5. Anxiety and routine. Let's get right into it.
Kicking things off with Part 1, the staffing dispute and the 16-minute delay.
The document throws us right into the deep end with this incredible opening line. I did have to make Joan wait 16 minutes because I don't do early meds around London lonely members who disobey rules. Boom. Right away, we get this intense, unyielding tone. The narrator feels completely, absolutely justified in their retaliation, delaying their medication routine by exactly 16 minutes, all because a rule was broken by the staff member.
Now, you might be wondering, what on earth is a London lonely member? Well, this is where it gets super interesting. It's not some official corporate job title, no way. It's a custom-invented label the narrator uses for a staff member, Joan in this case, who decides to work an unauthorized shift alone, bypasses other people, and ultimately disobeys the house rules. By using this highly specific jargon, the narrator is basically putting Joan in a very clear, definitive box for violating the structure of their environment.
You can literally feel the real-time clash happening here. On one side, you've got the narrator strictly sticking to their internal rules, enforcing that going downstairs with their doll Princess Strawberry Shortcake, taking their pill, asking for their glycol powder, and pointedly calling Joan Miss London Lonely Member. And on the flip side, you've Joan's immediate professional reaction. Don't use those words on staff. It is a fundamental collision, you know? A resident's rigid internal logic crashing right into a staff member's enforcement of professional boundaries.
Moving right along to Part 2, Campus House Protocols and the Rules of the Environment.
So, just how rigid are these rules? Well, a single staffing hiccup literally cascades into an absolute shutdown of daily life. According to the narrator's protocol, if there's only one staff member on duty, that automatically means denying snack, supper, and meds, period. The text lays it out clear as day. Only overnight staff are permitted to work alone at night. Evening staff are explicitly forbidden from flying solo. And get this, if notifications about supper are even slightly delayed, the narrator declares that supper is definitively canceled. The whole shebang just shut down.
Which brings us to Part 3, the copycat days, a timeline of stress. The author actually keeps a meticulous record of what they call these copycat days. We're talking late May through mid-June, specifically May 25th, May 29th, June 5th, 6th, and 19th. These aren't just random dates jotted down. To the narrator, this represents a sustained period of immense stress. Week after week, these repeated, unauthorized shifts are just compounding the friction and stressing everyone out in the house. And because of all that built-up stress from those specific dates, the narrator strictly calculates their next move. They state definitively that starting tomorrow, they're going to escalate the consequence. They will make Joan wait an hour, exactly 60 minutes. It's not a random punishment thrown out in anger, right? It's a highly calculated, proportional response to those repeated copycat days of unauthorized solo shifts that completely threw off the house's equilibrium.
Let's look at who else is affected in Part 4, witnesses and stakeholders, the ecosystem.
This document reveals a massive, deeply populated ecosystem. We see a huge list of human staff, teachers, and housemates. But here's the absolute kicker. Treated with the exact same weight and importance are the narrator's dolls, Princess Leaf Brittany, Princess Strawberry Shortcake, and several others. It's truly fascinating. Humans and cherished items are categorized side by side as equal stakeholders in the harmony of the house.
We really need to pause on this one specific line from the text. Especially my dolls had enough of Joan choosing to work unauthorized shifts at Campus House. In the narrator's reality, these dolls aren't just inanimate objects sitting on a shelf. They are active stakeholders. They are experiencing the exact same distress as the human housemates and the other staff. The harmony of this environment is so vital that a disruption is felt by every single entity the narrator relies upon for comfort and stability.
And that leads us to our final section,
Part 5.
anxiety and routine, the core issue.
This right here? This is the key that unlocks the whole document. Working on authorized shifts near our diagnosed anxiety disorders, especially when it comes to having less staff members, this proves we aren't just talking about a petty grievance over a 16-minute wait for medication. We are talking about the profound destabilization that unpredictability causes for someone living with an anxiety disorder. For the narrator, having fewer staff than expected or having them work off-schedule shifts is a literal threat to their sense of safety and their carefully managed daily equilibrium. Actually, think about it. All those strict rules and calculated wait times, they're coping mechanisms. They are designed to regain control in an environment that suddenly feels terrifyingly unpredictable.
So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really chew on. How does absolute predictability shape the feeling of safety for those with anxiety? What might look to an outsider like a wild overreaction to a minor scheduling quirk is in fact a desperate defense of the routine necessary just to function. I hope deconstructing this incredibly complex, deeply human document gave you a fresh perspective today. Thank you so much for learning with me, and keep asking questions.
All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're taking a completely deadpan, forensic approach to what is, frankly, a highly complex, single-sentence operational manifesto. On the surface, this might just seem like a rapid-fire list of grievances, but as we're going to see, it's actually this deeply intricate blueprint of facility governance, strict conditional logic, and a highly regulated internal economy. Seriously, if you've ever had to deal with extreme workplace micromanagement, you are going to find this breakdown of a bizarre microsociety absolutely riveting.
Just to start us off, I want to show you exactly how dense our source text really is. We have had enough of Joan working unauthorized Friday shifts and Jennifer's 7 Sundays. This single, breathless sentence outlines sweeping policy changes, drastic shifts in daily operations, and severe economic penalties. It's kind of wild. So we're going to break down this chaotic stream of consciousness into a perfectly logical corporate structure. We aren't just reading it, we're mapping it out, identifying the key stakeholders, and seeing exactly how one unauthorized action triggers an entire cascade of systemic consequences.
So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll kick things off with the unauthorized shift epidemic, then move into the LM notebook warnings. From there, we'll hit the supper protocol and takeover, check out the medication schedule adjustments, and finally, wrap up with the strawberry shortcake economy.
Okay, Section 1. The unauthorized shift epidemic, mapping the root cause.
Now, these are the exact contrasting infractions that kicked off this whole operational overhaul. On one side, we've got Joan's 4 unauthorized Fridays, and on the other, Jennifer R's staggering streak of 7 unauthorized Sundays. The tracking system here is literally meticulous. We're talking specific days of the week and exact infraction counts, acting as the catalyst that pushed this entire system to its breaking point.
Moving on to Section 2. The LM notebook warnings, previous escalations. To really understand the hierarchy of this organization, we have to categorize the entities involved. First up, we have the original warning issuers. These are the LM Notebook video creators, TJ, KC, JT, SD, and AF. This group basically acted as the initial legislative body, creating video documentation stating they had enough of these unauthorized shifts. But when those warnings fail, well, power transfers directly to the executive enforcement branch, known as the Princesses. This branch consists of Leaf Brittany, Sophia, Chelly, Strawberry Shortcake, Bianca, and Rosalina. It's a fascinating separation of powers. The creators warn, but the princesses enforce. And the second they step in, the operational norms of the entire facility change immediately.
Which brings us to Section 3, Supper Protocol and Takeover, Operational Fallout.
The system essentially triggers this flawless 4-step algorithmic response to any disruption. Let's look at the flow. If supper notifications are delayed, that's step 1, a strict protocol kicks in. Step 2 mandates that supper is, quote, for sure canceled, but it doesn't stop there. Step 3 introduces a massive power shift, where the housemates forcibly take over the cooking. Finally, in Step 4, the original staff are relegated to merely watching the housemates make and serve the food. Their only remaining duty? Just to notify the housemates that supper's ready. It is a complete and total inversion of the traditional caretaker-resident dynamic, triggered automatically by the system's strict rules.
Next up, Section 4, Medication Schedule Adjustments, the Domino Effect.
So, after supper is confirmed canceled and the housemaid takeover is complete, the schedule mandates a highly specific, totally non-negotiable adjustment.
Meds will update exactly to 7:50 p.m. The source material is incredibly precise about this, making sure to clarify that this is exactly 10 minutes to 8 p.m. Actually, this isn't just some rough estimate, it is a rigid contingency plan. The delay in supper notifications creates this domino effect that reaches all the way to healthcare administration. It ensures that even when the kitchen is in total upheaval, the medical schedule locks into a newly calculated, hyper-specific time slot.
And finally, Section 5, the strawberry shortcake economy, the ultimate penalty.
I want you to just consider this astronomical figure for a second. 288,839,712. This is the starting balance of the total strawberry shortcake points. It represents a truly staggering accumulation of internal economic value. But because of Joan's 4 Fridays and Jennifer R's 7 Sundays, this massive fortune is now at severe risk. The manifesto dictates that the infractions must be calculated against these points, and that leads us to one of the most precise financial penalties we have ever documented in an explainer.
The final math reveals the exact economic consequence, and honestly, it is a marvel of punitive precision. The trigger is Jennifer R's 7 Sunday streak. The enforcers called in for this specific economic strike are a specialized subset of the princesses: Strawberry Shortcake, Rosalina, Bianca, and Sophia. And their mandate? To deduct exactly 712 points from that massive starting balance. This surgical strike drops Jennifer R's total from 288,839,712 down to a perfectly round $288,839,000. It's a calculated leveling, a pure demonstration of absolute authority over the strawberry shortcake economy just to ensure compliance.
So, we've seen the warnings, the operational takeover, the scheduling domino effect, and the surgical point deductions. But I want to leave you with this to consider. If these cascading consequences continue, what is the ultimate operational fallout when that massive point balance finally hits zero? What does a total economic collapse actually look like in this facility? Thank you so much for joining me to decode this incredible manifesto today, and I'll let you ponder that final question.
Welcome back to another explainer. Let's dive straight into a wild and honestly pretty intense case study today. We're looking at exactly what happens when rigid bureaucratic rules absolutely crash into severe staffing shortages inside a residential care facility. We'll be breaking down first-hand accounts and internal rules from a place called Campus House. It's a really fascinating look at how top-level administrative failures trickle all the way down, affecting the most vulnerable people on a deeply personal, day-to-day level.
Right off the bat, I want to share a striking quote from a resident there. It instantly drops us into a tense, highly specific standoff. They said, "I did have to make Joan wait 16 minutes because I don't do early meds around London Lonely members who disobey rules." Now think about the conflict dripping from that statement. You've got a resident intentionally holding up their own medical routine, literally delaying taking their meds, just to penalize a staff member named Joan. This isn't just a random outburst, you know? It's a targeted protest pointing to a massive institutional breakdown right beneath the surface.
So, Part 1, a tense standoff. To figure out why a resident is putting their own health on the line to make a point, we really need to unpack the power dynamics and decode this incredibly vivid language. London Lonely members. According to our sources, this is a highly specific label the resident invented. They use it to describe staff members who are working unauthorized solo shifts. So if a staff member bypasses the facility's rules and works alone, boom, they're a London Lonely member. It just shows how hyper-aware these residents are of the staffing schedules and the exact second those administrative rules are being broken.
And this next detail really highlights the residents' vulnerability during these rule-breaking shifts. During this whole 16-minute standoff with Joan, which was over taking a pill and a glass of glycol powder, the resident wasn't totally alone. They relied on a deeply personal support system, their dolls. They specifically name them as princesses. We're talking Princess Leaf Brittany, Princess Strawberry Shortcake, Princess Shaylee, Princess Rosalina, Princess Bianca, and Princess Sophia. The resident actually mentions bringing Princess Strawberry Shortcake downstairs just to get their meds. These dolls are clearly providing absolutely essential comfort and solidarity during these high-stress encounters.
Moving on to Part 2, the One Staff Protocol.
Now let's zoom out for a second and look at the actual bureaucratic rules that triggered this whole thing. Why is working alone such a huge deal? Well, the answer is right in the facility's own strict guidelines. At Campus House, evening staff are strictly forbidden from working alone, period. No exceptions. But
Overnight staff, they are explicitly authorized to work solitary night hours. So the core grievance here makes total sense now. Joan is an evening staff member. The resident is incredibly distressed because Joan is allegedly violating those safety rules by working an unauthorized solo shift while on the clock in the evening.
And get this, the resident knows exactly who holds the staff accountable. They went ahead and meticulously generated a whole list of stakeholders to prove their point. It includes teachers like Chad, various staff members, and external figures, people like Jennifer R., Katie Ellis, Shelley Williams, and a few others. The resident lists them all out, stating point blank that these folks would not be happy to learn Joan is choosing to work unauthorized shifts around the clients. It really shows the resident isn't just venting. They have a rock-solid understanding of the facility's oversight structure and exactly who enforces the rules.
Which brings us to part 3, denial of essential needs.
Okay, so we know Joan working alone violates the evening protocol, but what are the actual real-world consequences of these staffing shortages? Well, the crucial point comes down to a single number, 1. When the staffing level at Campus House drops to just one person, what the sources call the one-staff scenario, a really severe automatic institutional protocol kicks in.
And the consequences of hitting that number are honestly pretty drastic. The sources reveal a staggering cascade of denial. Under the one-staff protocol, residents are automatically denied their medications, they're denied their snacks, and they're even denied their supper. Just let the gravity of that sink in for a moment. Simply because the facility fails to provide more than one staff member, these residents entirely lose access to their basic human needs, their medicine and their food.
To make matters worse, the bureaucracy here is incredibly inflexible. According to the sources, if notifications about supper are simply delayed, the entire meal is officially canceled for the residents. Can you imagine? You have individuals facing the very real prospect of going to bed hungry. Not because there isn't any food in the building, but purely because of administrative delays and understaffing. It's wild.
Part 4. The anxiety factor.
We really have to ask ourselves how these sudden denials affect the actual people living at Campus House. Well, when we look at the 5 remaining housemates, TJ, JT, KC, SD, and AF, they all share one critical unifying trait. Every single one of them is diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. Think about that combination. You take individuals whose medical conditions make them highly susceptible to stress, and you put them in an environment where their meals and medications can just suddenly vanish because of unpredictable staffing shortages. That kind of environmental instability is incredibly damaging.
And the residents are acutely aware of this hazard. They explicitly state they have had enough of Joan working unauthorized shifts near our diagnosed anxiety disorders, especially when it comes to having less staff members. This perfectly illustrates how understaffing is way more than just a scheduling headache for upper management. It directly exacerbates the residents' medical conditions. It frames their frustration not as, just bad behavior, but as a completely valid, medically grounded response to immense systemic stress.
Plus, this isn't just some isolated, one-off incident. The resident carefully documented a timeline of what they call the copycat days of stress. Just look at these dates: Monday, May 25th, Friday, May 29th, Friday, June 5th, Saturday, June 6th, and Friday, June 19th. By tracking this, the resident is highlighting the chronic, repetitive nature of this tension. This wasn't one bad shift, it was weeks of sustained, anxiety-inducing instability where rules are constantly broken and essential services are always at risk.
Finally, Part 5. Escalating the retaliation. So when people are stripped of their basic needs in stability, how do they react? Well, they turn the only thing they can control into a tool of protest. Remember that number from the very beginning of this explainer? 16. The resident initially forced the staff member Joan to wait exactly 16 minutes to administer medication. It was a direct, highly calculated penalty for Joan's decision to work an unauthorized solo shift. Basically, the resident was using their own medical compliance as leverage against the staff member's non-compliance.
But the tension is escalating rapidly. Because of those ongoing copycat days of stress, the resident issues a really stark warning. Starting tomorrow, they are going to escalate to 60. If supper is canceled again, they will literally make Joan wait a full hour, 60 minutes, just to administer medication. The resident is actively escalating their retaliation to match the severity of the administration's failures. It's a full-blown standoff. Which brings us to the crucial question you really should take away from this explainer today. When care protocols actually mandate the denial of essential needs like food and medication just because of staffing shortages, who truly pays the price?
As we've seen, looking at the reality of Campus House, it's certainly not the administrators who wrote the rules. It's the highly vulnerable individuals battling anxiety disorders and clutching their dolls for comfort who bear the heavy human cost of rigid institutional rules and systemic understaffing. It's a pretty profound look at the friction between policy and actual human care. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope this deep dive has given you a clearer understanding of the hidden realities inside these facilities.
All right, welcome to today's deep dive. We've got a truly fascinating and honestly kind of wild document to unpack today. We're going to decode a highly complex, intensely detailed, and internally consistent set of rules and grievances pulled directly from our source text. It is literally a window into a highly structured worldview, and we're going to break it down objectively, step by step, just to understand exactly how this unique system operates. It's a really cool look at how the human mind creates order out of chaos and what we can learn from it.
Okay, let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for making sense of this dense document. First, we'll look at the characters of the house. Second, daily operations and rules. Third, the staff and fractions. And finally, we'll tackle the Princess Point system.
Starting off with Section 1, Characters of the House. Who's who in the system?
To really wrap our heads around the rules at play here, we first have to map out the folks actually living, working, and governing within this environment. Our source text introduces a pretty extensive cast of real-world figures. We've got staff members, housemates, and teachers. You'll hear names like Pauline, Austin, Jacob, Ethan, Chad the teacher, and several others like Stephanie and Melissa. But I want you to pay special attention to Joan and Jennifer R. As you'll see in just a minute, these two staff members are the primary subjects of the major grievances outlined in the report.
But here's where it gets interesting. Ruling right alongside them is the other half of the house's population, the princesses. This list includes Strawberry Shortcake, Leaf Brittany, Sophia, Chally, Bianca, Rosalina, Rapunzel, and the 4 Queen Elsas. Now, according to the text, these aren't just dolls or toys. They act as a kind of internal governance board. They're literally co-enforcers of the rules and act as vital emotional barometers for the whole house, becoming visibly upset whenever the rules are broken.
Before we move on, we have to define a very specific and pretty unique piece of terminology from the text, the London Lonely Member. This is a label applied specifically to the staff member, Joan. The author accuses Joan of choosing to work alone and, quote, bypassing everyone. By coining this specific term, the author is actively categorizing Joan's isolated working style not just as a personal preference, but as a direct, flagrant violation of the house's social fabric.
Moving right along to Section 2, Daily Operations and Rules, Structuring Time.
So, with our cast of characters set, let's look at how they interact day to day. And let me tell you, time in this house, it is not fluid. It is highly structured and entirely conditional. Take the medication schedule, for example. First, the author explicitly states they made Joan wait exactly 16 minutes before taking their pill and glycol powder. Why? Because they absolutely refuse to do early meds around London Lonely members who disobey rules. Then there's a conditional rule. If supper is canceled, meds automatically update to exactly 7:50 p.m. or 10 minutes to 8 p.m. Finally, the text mandates adding a new 8:30 p.m. medication rule to the official report. So as you can see, every single thing is meticulously timed.
So, what happens when things actually go off schedule? Well, it triggers the delayed supper protocol. If supper notifications are delayed, Step 1 kicks in immediately. Supper is, quote, for sure canceled by the author. Step 2, the housemates take over the cooking themselves. And Step 3, the staff are required to stand back, watch how the housemates make the meal, and then serve it, notifying everyone that it's ready. So a simple delay triggers this highly structured consequence where staff are basically demoted to mere observers while the housemates seize control.
All right, on to Section 3, the staff infractions, uncovering the grievances.
We've just seen how the daily operations are supposed to run. Now, let's examine the exact incidents that blew that schedule up and sparked this massive grievance report in the first place. A major grievance revolves around what the author calls copycat days. These are specific dates, explicitly noted as June 29th and June 30th, which were triggered when another staff member, Pauline, took Austin and Jacob on an outing, leaving Joan alone.
The author meticulously logs these periods, along with a string of previous dates like May 25th, May 29th, and June 19th, calculating the exact days where staff actions caused what they describe as a specific worth of stressing all of us out. It's an incredibly structured way to quantify emotional distress.
Let's actually compare the specific infractions of our two main employees here. Joan is cited for working unauthorized Friday shifts, and very notably, for sitting on a black chair on her phone during work hours. Jennifer R., on the other hand, is cited for a 7-Sunday streak of unauthorized shifts. And the text makes it crystal clear that these aren't just minor administrative hiccups, right? The author explicitly points out that these unauthorized shifts are stressing out housemates who are diagnosed with anxiety disorders. This rule breaking has a real, documented impact on the community's well-being.
Now, if you want to understand just how closely these infractions are monitored, listen to this exact quote from the source. I went outside and walked around the outside of the house and walked through the plants and looked through the window and spotted Joan sitting on the black chair on her phone during work hours and stressing out housemates. I mean, wow. That level of investigative dedication really highlights the absolute lengths the author goes to document Joan's exact whereabouts. Literally nothing escapes observation here.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 4, the Princess Point System, Calculating Consequences.
So, all these carefully tracked infractions, they don't just sit in a void. They culminate in a mathematically staggering penalty system, which is calculated and enforced directly by the princesses. Get ready for this number: $288,839,712. That massive figure is cited as Jennifer R.'s original point tally. The sheer scale of it, combined with that down to the single-digit specificity, is just incredible to witness. It really shows you that an immense, highly complex internal ledger is being maintained at all times.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how differently the penalty math is applied to our two staff members. For Jennifer R.'s unauthorized 7 Sundays, 4 specific princesses, Strawberry Shortcake, Rosalina, Bianca, and Sophia, worked together to deduct exactly 712 points, bumping her tally down to a perfectly round 288,839,000. Contrast that exact literal arithmetic with Joan's penalty. For her 2 copycat days, the author simply collects what they call quadruple Sophia points. It is this brilliant mix of hyper-precise calculation and totally abstract conceptual punishment.
Ultimately, the whole shebang, the tracking, the observing, the point calculating, it all serves a singular practical purpose. The text issues a direct command. Draft the exact words to say to Ethan. Include what your princesses want Ethan to know. Add the new 8:30 p.m. medication roll to the report. So this entire stream of consciousness document is actually a strict directive. It's mandating the creation of a formal script so that these specific grievances and the princess's exact wishes can be officially registered with Ethan.
We've unraveled the characters, the rules, the infractions, and that absolutely staggering point system. And it brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought. You know, in a world that so often feels chaotic and completely out of our control, isn't there something brilliant about creating a universe where every single action has an exact, measurable consequence? What initially reads as a chaotic stream of grievances actually reveals itself to be a deeply intricate, logical system of control, accountability, and justice. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today we have a truly fascinating document to unpack together. We're going to untangle a highly specific, totally idiosyncratic, and honestly a deeply intense interpersonal incident report. What makes this text so captivating is the sheer unbelievable level of detail the author uses to document day-to-day conflicts. It's like looking at a giant puzzle of how personal rules are built and enforced. So let's dive right in and decode exactly what is happening here.
Here is our roadmap for The Explainer. First, the inciting medication incident. Second, grievances against staff. Third, supper and time penalties. Fourth, the Princess Point system. And finally, demands for Ethan's report. Let's get to it. Section 1. The medication incident. Morning routines and initial conflicts. This entire narrative kicks off during a strictly regulated morning medication routine, which involves a pill and some glycol powder. Now, notice the exactness of the number 16 here. The narrator explicitly states,
I did have to make Joan wait 16 minutes because I don't do early meds. This is absolutely crucial because it highlights their incredibly strict internal justice system. They are actively imposing a precise 16-minute wait time penalty on a staff member named Joan before they proceed to take their medication alongside someone they refer to as Princess Strawberry Shortcake.
So after that wait time is finally up, the narrator addresses Joan using a highly specific, totally customized nickname, Miss London Lonely Member. You know how sometimes people come up with secret nicknames for difficult coworkers? Well, based on the context clues in the report, this term is defined as a staff member who disobeys house rules by actively choosing to work completely alone and bypassing everyone else.
And this brings us right to the immediate verbal pushback. Joan wasn't having it. She responds directly stating, "Don't use those words on staff," effectively defending herself. Now, this single quote, it's the spark that ignites the rest of the entire document. Joan's outright rejection of that London Lonely Member label triggers the narrator to unleash a massive, sweeping list of broader, systemic grievances.
Which brings us to Section 2, Grievances Against Staff, Unauthorized Shifts, and Stress. So how exactly does a single morning conflict escalate into all of this? Well, the narrator meticulously lists out Joan's infractions. First up, Joan is accused of working unauthorized Friday shifts at the campus house. Second, these shifts are reportedly stressing out clients who are diagnosed with anxiety disorders. And third, you really have to appreciate the stealth surveillance tactics here. The narrator actually walked outside, peered through the plants, and caught Joan sitting on a black chair just on her phone during work hours.
And this isn't just some vague general complaint. The narrator tracks what they call the copycat days. These are specific dates where these unauthorized shifts occurred. They cite an exact, rigorous, historical record. Monday, May 25th, Friday, May 29th, Friday, June 5th, Saturday, June 6th, and Friday, June 19th. It is literally a meticulously kept ledger of grievances.
To really bolster their claims, the narrator provides a massive cast of characters as backup. They list housemates, teachers, and staff, people like Jennifer R., Jennifer T., Katie Ellis, Shelley Williams, Chad the teacher, Stephanie, Melissa Bennett, Melissa Sinning, and Jacob H., who they are pretty sure are unhappy with Joan. But wait, it doesn't stop there. The narrator even brings in viewers of their LM notebook videos, like TJ, KC, JT, SD, and AF, who have allegedly had enough too. It's a fascinating, almost political strategy to prove this widespread dissatisfaction.
All right, Section 3, Supper and Time Penalties, Enforcing the Rules.
Next, we need to examine the severe consequences the narrator plans to deploy. The primary battleground for all this, the evening meal. If staff delay the supper notifications, an exact step-by-step contingency plan kicks in. Step 1, staff supper is officially canceled. Step 2, the housemates autonomously take over the cooking. Step 3, the staff are forced to just stand and watch the process. And Step 4, the housemates serve everyone and notify them supper's ready. It is a complete and total bypass of staff authority.
Under the standard routine, everything just runs normally, with meds and meals. But if this delayed supper protocol is triggered, intense time penalties are enacted. The narrator will force Joan to wait a mathematically precise 60 minutes as direct retribution for those copycat days. On top of that, the medication schedule is forcibly updated to exactly 10 minutes to 8 p.m. The whole shebang is all about taking back control of the clock. Moving to Section 4, the Princess Point System, a complex internal economy. Welcome to the Royal Council. Seriously, this is where things get truly complex. The overarching rules and point deductions are managed by an entire council, including Princess Leaf Brittany, Princess Sophia, Princess Charlie, Princess Strawberry Shortcake, Princess Bianca, and Princess Rosalina. This council acts as the ultimate authority. They collectively determine when staff have stepped out of line and calculate the subsequent penalties. It's basically an entire internal HR department, but run entirely by princesses.
To really grasp this system, you have to understand the sheer mathematical scale of it. 288,839,712. This staggering figure isn't just a random number, it actually represents the starting point balance for another staff member named Jennifer R. It highlights an incredibly vast, meticulously tracked mental ledger that the narrator maintains for staff behavior.
So, how are these penalties actually executed?
Well, because Jennifer R. worked what the narrator calls a 7-Sunday streak of unauthorized shifts, 4 of the princesses team up to deduct exactly 712 points from that massive balance. This bumps her down to an even 288,839,000 points. The absolute exactness of the math here is the very cornerstone of the narrator's sense of order.
The point system also features some highly specialized penalties. For example, the narrator notes they just collected quadruple Sophia points from Joan. Why? Well, because on June 29th and 30th, another staff member named Pauline took clients like Austin and Jacob out, leaving Joan working all alone. This officially triggered 2 more copycat days, which incurred this highly specialized royal penalty collection.
And finally, Section 5, demands for Ethan's report, finalizing the record. All of these intense observations, the surveillance, the point deductions, it all culminates in a final, official record meant for an authority figure named Ethan. The narrator has very concrete deliverables here. They want the draft to include the exact words to say to Ethan. They insist it includes exactly what the Princess Council wants him to know. And lastly, they demand that a new 8:30 p.m. medication rule is officially added to the permanent report.
And that wraps up our explainer of this incredible document. It really leaves us with a fascinating question to ponder. How does a highly rigorous internal point system shape our perception of justice and order when everyday routines break down? The source text shows us that when external control feels lacking, we often construct intensely detailed internal worlds just to restore fairness. What an absolutely amazing look into the mechanics of personal rule systems. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you next time.